The Knots Company welcomes you back to Focus on Automation, where we explore and celebrate advances that empower manufacturing. Welcome back to Focus on Automation. I'm your host, Todd Youngblood, and today we're going to take yet another deep dive into the wonderful world of robots. And to help us broaden and deepen our understanding of robotics and where it's all headed, I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Joe Campbell. He's Senior Manager, Strategic Marketing and Applications Development at Universal Robots. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Todd. Thank you.
Well, really delighted to have you. Just to get us started off here, Joe, give us a little bit of insight into your background, where you came from, and how you wound up at UR.
Well, I've been at UR for about 16 months now, and prior to that, I've actually spent better than 40 years in the robotics industry. It's been virtually all my career. Most of that time was spent on the traditional side of the industry, not the collaborative side. Yeah. And for me, it has just been a really wonderful journey to understand the things that we can do with collaborative robots and kind of the impact we can make on manufacturing today with this new technology.
Gosh, it's interesting you say that. I remember, I shouldn't age myself like you, but I remember some of those robots in the early 80s. I remember just being blown away by what they could do, and looking back on it, it's almost laughable when you think about how excited we all were back in those days.
Well, it's you know, the technology's been around for quite a while, literally for 45 years. Yeah. And I think one thing to remember is the industry emerged out of the automotive sector. Right, that was the first big driver, the first big user of this brand new technology, and consequently, those roots helped shape a lot of the view of the industry and the beliefs that drive the industry. And what we're seeing right now is a very interesting change with the collaborative technology. Traditional robots they're kind of an all or nothing proposition, meaning they were really designed in the early installations. You had to solve all of the manufacturing problems in a process because you obviously couldn't have humans and robots interacting.
Right.
And today we see a very, very dramatically different approach that we call incremental automation. It basically, if you have a 10-step process, you don't have to automate all 10 steps on day one. Pick the one that's causing you a problem and see if you can put your best skilled operator on that process, and then automate the straightforward, the dull, dirty, and dangerous steps of the process, and do it quickly.
Yeah, it's that old idea of walk before you run, or crawl before you walk, and walk before you run. Hey, I want to back us up just a little bit. There might be 3 people out there in our audience that are not familiar with Universal Robots. Give us a quick overview of who you are.
Yeah, we've been around about 10 years. The company was founded by a true visionary who came out of a small university in a small city in Denmark called Odense. And this university put a real strong, powerful emphasis on this emerging robot technology. And so consequently, Odense today is one of the most powerful robot hubs in the world. And what was interesting is the founders, particularly the chief technology officer, Espen, came at the problem with a completely different viewpoint. And they were not trying to build, the next in a long line of large industrial robots. They were trying to build robots that were able to work side by side with humans, and that was the original architecture from the ground up.
Yeah, because it's a very different approach. Let's come at it from the other angle before we get back into collaborative robots and what they can do. But the big issue, at least from my perspective, Joe, in the manufacturing industry today is jobs, as in lots of jobs and nobody to fill them.
That's correct.
Give us some insight into that, and then we'll kind of segue into how cobots can help address that problem.
Well, I think one of the challenges today is plant managers, manufacturing managers, executive suite leaders. Everybody knows it's hard to hire right now, but I hear way too many times that the issue is the low unemployment rate. the low unemployment rate is a symptom of what's going on. The real issue we're facing is one of demographics. You're a boomer, I'm a boomer,
Yep.
and there's 10,000 of us retiring every day. It's a big number. And the scarier number is that right now, 27% of the manufacturing workforce in America is 55 years or older.
Yeah, that's an amazing statistic.
It is, and the backfill is not happening. The younger generations understandably want better, and they don't want to work in a dull, dirty, repetitive, motion-based factory, and consequently, we just are having a terrible time trying to hire people into manufacturing.
And what kind of things is you are specifically doing to address this beyond the actual robot technology? Is there anything you guys are doing to address the, what should I call it, the training issue, or is it a PR issue?
Well, it's a little bit of both, and we are having impact on both ends of it. I spend a lot of time trying to talk to manufacturing leadership across the country. And what I really try to do is not just scare them, but I want to give them the data and the statistics so they understand that they're going to have to change their manufacturing and business processes to survive. The projections right now from multiple sources, including the National Association of Manufacturers and Deloitte and Bureau of Labor Statistics, are pointing towards a 2.4 million worker shortfall in manufacturing by 2028. That's a huge number.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my head around 2.4 million. Wow.
Well, so to put it in perspective, with all the hassle we're having today in trying to hire people into manufacturing, there are just under 500,000 open manufacturing positions now,
Yep.
and we're struggling. And what's going to happen when that number is 2.4 million?
Yeah.
It's really going to have a big impact. It's really showing up in bottom line too, and in limited growth potential. National Association of Manufacturers says 29% of their members are turning down additional business because they can't staff their manufacturing operations.
As an old sales guy, that's just so painful for me to hear.
It's brutal. It is.
Now, let me push back a little bit, because I've talked to some other folks, particularly those that are more on the academic side of the manufacturing industry, who seem to be very bullish about breaking through this dark, dirty, dangerous thing and getting young folks more interested in manufacturing. Do you think that's due just to their perspective as educators, maybe not, being down there on the plant floor? Or because you sound pessimistic about lots of folks showing up saying, hey, manufacturing is cool.
Well, I think we're doing a lot. We as an industry are doing a lot to change that perception. And I actually think that the collaborative robots are going to be a big contributor to that. Because anytime you can clean up a manufacturing process and really take out the dull, repetitive activities and automate those, then people's human nature comes out, right? We as a race, we want to be productive and we want to be creative and we want to contribute. As those are general drivers for satisfaction. And I think if we can put people in those type of positions, I think we'll get traction. I think it will happen. I fully support all the efforts around STEM, and I think that's paying off. But we still have work to do.
Well, I want to clarify a little bit, because it sounds like your perspective is that if I install, a half a dozen cobots in my factory, that might actually stimulate more interest in manufacturing, as opposed to what you typically hear is, oh boy, the union guys are going to go nuts that we're eliminating jobs.
Yeah,
you're not saying that at all.
No, completely the opposite. Now, and I wish I could pull together data to support it, but I can tell you anecdotally, in speaking with our customers, they report much better reception from a younger generation of workers when they're in an environment that includes collaborative technology, right? It's made it easier for them to attract and retain talent. I think the other thing it's done, it's provided a path up for many people in manufacturing who want to do more. And we've got another great track record in converting skilled line operators, skilled manufacturing workers into robot technicians and robot programmers. And I think that certainly is a testament to the success of the technology.
Yeah, let's go back now to the genesis of UR and the whole idea of creating the company with the idea of collaboration in mind. Give us the UR, give us the Joe Campbell definition. What is a cobot?
Well, so there's lots of ways to define cobot, and
That's why I asked you the question.
just about every color robot you can imagine will lay some kind of claim to being a cobot. But in our case, our products were architected from the ground up to work side by side with human workers. We've built in really significant safety structures in all of our control architecture. We've got 17 levels of safety protocols that can be set to really, meet just about any application scenario. But that is the core of the cobot definition, is the ability to work safely side by side with human operators. Now, having said that, my disclaimer is every application needs a risk assessment. So just because the robot says cobot, that does not mean it's safe in any application. So a risk assessment is required.
Yeah. From your perspective, Joe, talk through one or two examples of common first applications of a cobot. So I'm kind of driving it. If I'm a plant manager, how on earth do I get started on this whole thing? So give us an example or two.
I'll give you two good ones, right? So if you've got any kind of processes that require the loading and unloading of machines, and particularly if you're in any kind of a high mix, low volume operation, then those are great applications to start with. Machine tending, machine loading.
Yeah.
They're very repetitive. From a job satisfaction standpoint, they're not particularly high turnover in those positions.
Right.
And it's something that's easily automated. And the benefit multiplies. It's not just the ability to put a cobot in and free up an operator to go do some higher value task. Now you've got the ability to extend the runtime of the machine.
Right.
And in some cases, people say, well, I'm going to run 3 shifts, lights out. Well, you don't have to go that far. If you have a machine tool you've made a major capital investment in, if you can get that machine tool to run a few more hours a day producing parts for your job orders, that's a significant win, and it really shows up in the bottom line. Yeah. So if I were in any kind of manufacturing where there's machine loading, whether it's machine tool, injection molding, die cast, et cetera, I'd look there very quickly.
Okay, before you move on to the second example, talk a little bit about the dollars and cents. And I know the answer is it depends, obviously, but give us a rough feel of what I could expect if I'm going to do the relatively simple entry-level sort of load-unload application you just described.
Well, we're seeing, good value-added distributors or lean integrators deploy our robots into machine tool load and unload applications with an all-in price tag, $60,000, $65,000, $70,000, $75,000, all in. Robot, base, stand, mounting, gripper, programming, installation, startup. Now, that's really, in many areas, it's right at or less than the cost of hiring and training
of an individual. Yeah.
An individual.
Yeah.
Right. And it really magnifies if you're trying to work, 5-10 hour days. Now you're paying overtime. That payback period shrinks very quickly. Or it's very, very common for our robots to generate less than 1 year payback.
That's, I've heard that before, and I've seen it happen, and it still astonishes me.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to remember is to go back to that all or nothing versus incremental automation. The CFO you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
And the CFO is a lot happier if you're bringing a series of $75,000 investments that are quick to install and implement and start paying off very quickly and pay off in less than a year. That makes the CFO happy.
Yeah, I'm going to poke at that a little bit more. If you mentioned, how robots, grew out of the automotive industry. If I'm General Motors, a $75,000 investment is a rounding error. Of course, duh, why wouldn't I do
Yep.
that? Most American manufacturers, the vast majority of them are small.
Yep.
And so the risk of spending 75 grand, it's a lot more frightening. Talk me through. I'm a guy running a small factory with say 30 folks in it. 75 grand scares me.
Well, but I'm going to put it in a different perspective for that small shop owner, right? And this is a quote that I heard from a customer. That's pretty interesting. I was going to buy a new pickup truck this year. Maybe I'll hold off 1 year and buy this robot.
Huh.
That's how they frame it, right? And if you're a 15, 20 man shop, $75,000 is a lot of money, but the payback can be significant. Now, the other thing we've done is we've partnered up with a global leasing company called DLL,
Uh-huh.
and we're working with our distribution partners in DLL to offer leasing packages.
So you really lessen the cash flow impact.
Absolutely. And again, with a product, these machine loading applications are routinely installed up and running in less than a month from purchase order. Right?
That's almost as hard to believe as the 1 year payback. Although again, I know I've seen it, so I know what you're saying is absolutely accurate.
Yep, it is. And I think what we've tried to do is strip out the time and engineering cost and risk throughout the entire process. And we pick good partners too. That's
Well,
also a big part of the equation.
that is a huge part of the equation, just to have that the intellectual content of the cobot application. I got to tell you, I just need to repeat it because it never occurred to me before to compare a cobot, that 75K or so investment, with a pickup truck. Because I can't think of a plant manager of a smaller plant that does not have a $75,000 pickup truck.
That's right.
Maybe
That's their badge.
two, and they got one of them in their own garage at home too.
Yep, that's it.
That really jolted my brain in terms of just comparing it. I mean, how can you live without your pickup truck? You can't.
Well, the conversations I've had with some of the small and medium-sized enterprises, they just don't have that many dials they can turn to change their manufacturing model. Right? Again, they're not General Motors. You can't put $100 million into a plant, and so this becomes a very attractive investment for them, especially when they start to recognize that it's something that they can handle. Right? The technology is designed to not require the best of the best of the best robot programmer, et cetera. It's designed to be deployed by smart manufacturing professionals.
Gotcha. Well, let's go back. Let's stay in the context of this small or maybe a mid-sized manufacturer. And let's say I got my $175,000 cobot application installed. It's up and running. I got my payback in less than a year, let's say. What next? If I'm going to take the next step up the food chain, what kind of application might I look at?
Well, so first of all, what we see in these I'll call it any kind of contract manufacturing, but contract machining, contract packaging, et cetera. If that first investment's successful, and they are, then it's very, very common to just roll it out across the entire factory. I think the other point to make is that because our cobots are so easy to program and set up, they can be redeployed very, very quickly. And that has evolved this concept of a cobot as a tool. And there are now many providers that actually make carts that our cobots can be mounted to, and they can be wheeled up in front of whatever machine is running today's production run that can benefit from an automatic loader.
Interesting. I could put it in the bed of my pickup truck, right?
You could, but it's really common to see them getting pushed around the factory. And when today's production mix is different than yesterday's, you need that flexibility.
Now that's interesting. Do the economics follow that? Like if I have one application, and let's say I get my 12-month payback as we've discussed, and I have one of these carts and roll it down to the other end of the line and do some other operation with it, so my investment is dramatically less. Am I still getting this? Am I still getting the same kind of payback from application 2, literally using the same, at least the same hardware?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly in an operation where there's repetitive processes, it's very, very common. I think once installed and successful, then other benefits start to accrue. So for example, then again, this is what I hear from, again, we'll talk about contract machine shops in detail. If they have X number of machine tools and they have X number of spindle hours to make parts, right? And the more they can optimize that, the more business they can handle.
Right.
So if they can automate the load and unload process and really strip out wasted time, what that does is free up machine time for them to take another order that they could not have taken before.
It's like building a new assembly line.
It is. And anytime you can strip out dead time, you really start to build some significant savings or business increases.
Yeah.
And so that's the second edge of the payback. You don't see that early on, but once you start to realize that you've got more machine capacity that you can now sell effectively, right now your top line starts to grow.
Interesting. I want to take you back to the robot decision process, and we didn't really call it that as we were talking about it, but you mentioned several things about a decision process of how would I do that? I'm a plant manager. I'm looking out across the floor. And just take me from the beginning to the end at a high level. What is the decision process I ought to be going through? What do I look for? How do I approach it?
What we see is what we listen for is pain points. And it could be, and these are all real, right? I've heard all of these multiple times.
Okay.
My number one customer has asked me to take on a big order, and I'm worried about having enough production capacity to fulfill that order on time.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
That has everybody's attention.
It does. Another scenario is, and we see this scenario where perhaps the company has automated with traditional automation, but their number one customer comes and says, I need your help to produce this small lot product, right? So the good news about traditional automation is it's geared to make lots of products in the same fashion at higher speeds.
More and more efficiency.
It's difficult to take a small lot into that kind of environment because the tooling setup costs are way out of line.
Yeah.
Right. So there's another pain point. Other pain points are just labor availability. It was kind of shocking to me. I spent a lot of time talking in the woodworking, furniture making, cabinet building industry. For them, it's really difficult to get sanders. Right. If you're getting a new kitchen, every door, every panel has been hand sanded with an orbital sander. In some cases they just can't get them and keep them. In other cases, one plant manager told me he has 14 sanders on staff because on any given day, 3 or 4 of them don't come to work.
Aye.
So there's a labor availability issue. I think the other perspective is if you look at the guy who owns a small shop, he or she has made huge capital investments in their machine tools.
Right.
The only way you recoup that investment is that machine tool has to keep running. So if you're constrained on your ability to hire, what happens? Well, you have utilization issues. You got your machines, whether it's a machine tool or an injection molding machine. If it's sitting idle and not making parts, you're still paying for it. You're still depreciating it, right? So those are the kind of pain points that we listen for, and we hear them all day.
Gosh, let's take a look out into the future. Over the next, say, 3 to 5 years, what kind of things do you see coming at us in terms of cobots?
I think the product lines will always be expanding, although there are some real limits to producing true collaborative robots that can truly work side by side with humans. There's a point where you can't carry too much payload, right? Because that violates the safety protocols.
Momentum you don't change the physics.
Yeah, you do not violate the laws of physics, but The other thing that I think is happening, and we're starting to see this build momentum very quickly right now. Today, we've got this program called UR Plus, and it's a series of partner developed products like vision systems and grippers and mounting bases and indexers, et cetera, that are engineered and designed to work with universal products. And we validate and test them, right, before we put the stamp of approval on them. But these are mostly components, right? Gripper's a component.
Right.
What we're seeing now is the bundling of the robot and components with software into a higher order application kit, right? To make the deployment of the technology that much easier. Now, and I'll give you a very good example. There's a company up in Montreal called Robotique. They've been a great partner of ours almost from day one.
I'm familiar with those guys.
All right, so they developed a sanding head, right? And they worked with a company called Dynabraid who makes sanders, and they came up with a very, very nice sanding head that is UR Plus certified to work with our robot. But the next thing they did is now taking it up the food chain further. They developed software package to set up complex sanding protocols on very complex geometries, right? So picture the demo that they have that I absolutely love to see is it is a very modern pressed plywood back chair, the kind of thing you would probably see at IKEA, for example.
Yep.
Right. So this is compound contours, and traditional approach, it would take 1 to 2 days to program, right, the sanding pattern for that chair.
Yep.
With their software, they can literally do it in 10 minutes.
Whew.
So what it's done is it's taken the risk out, the time out, it's simplified the deployment of that particular application. And I think we're going to see more and more of that approach.
Well, I've held this opinion for decades that systems integration is always the most difficult, most costly. Yeah, I can do it in a week. It takes 3. And so you're really pulling that systems integration work back into the UR factory. And it's all done when I unpack the box. Am I getting that right?
Well, I think, yeah, to a certain degree, yes. There's always going to be some engineering that's required. Now,
it's not going to be perfect. Yeah, I get it.
You can do it in-house, you can do it outside, but I think the other thing that's evolving is this emergence of a new class of integrators. Traditional integrators, who many I count as dear friends for a long time, they have to operate at scale. Right? They have to.
They got the same issues everybody else has. Yeah, why should they be different?
And that's their business model. What we're seeing now, though, is this emergence of what I call lean integrator. These are very nimble, engineering-driven companies. They're usually, 5 or 10 person operations. Maybe they have 2,500 or 5,000 square feet. They don't want to do a $2 million job that's going to take 22 weeks.
Yeah.
But they're very happy to do $70,000 collaborative robot cells that turn over in 4 weeks. And so, a lean integrator like this could take the Robotique sanding kit, right, and finish the cell, right? Parts in feed, parts out feed, set up the initial programming, do the operator interface, do the training, etc.
Wow, that's a whole new entrepreneurial niche for the entire industry.
Well, and there's a couple.
That kind of company didn't exist 10 years ago.
No, and it's what I also find interesting is there's a number of these companies that have actually come out of customer shops.
Well, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
So, for example, I'll give you 2 examples. There's a guy down in Texas named Gary Kuzman, who's the owner of All Access Machining. Gary was the first customer that I met when I joined UR, and his story just kind of boggled me. But he started off he bought his first robot. He had a 16-person company.
Yep.
He was struggling to hire. He couldn't fulfill orders. He couldn't grow. Segue to today, he's a 22-person shop. He's got 9 or 10 robots. everybody in his company except his accountant can program and set up the robot. He's more profitable, he's growing the business, and he's working fewer hours. So
what's wrong with this picture?
Well,
Wow.
he loved it so much, he actually started off a spin-off company that is actually doing integration of universal robots into machine load and unload cells. Very successful. Another example is up in Chicago, a guy named Craig Zobaris. His story is a little bit different. His shop team forced him to get an Instagram account so he could look at all these cobot videos. And he did the same thing. He applied them in his shop, generated the savings, which of course he documents and he can share. And now he's got a very successful lean integrator business.
Gosh, that's interesting. One more baby boomer forced to learn how to use Instagram.
There you go.
Joe, look, I have already kept you way past the time I promised I'd let you go and get back to your real job. But before I let you go, I want to make sure folks know how not only to get a hold of you, but to learn more about Universal Robots, Cobots, and all of the application and integration and UR Plus goodies that are out there. How do we get a hold of you and learn more?
To come to me directly, my email address is joka at universal-robots.com. You can certainly go to the website, which is rich with online training tools. We have an online academy that is now trained over 90,000 people around the world.
Wow, I had no idea it was that many already.
Yeah, it's growing like a weed. It's really incredible. Roughly 2 hours, you can get the fundamentals of cobot programming down. But anyway, all that is available at www.universal-robots.com.
Great. Joe Campbell, Senior Manager, Strategic Marketing and Applications Development at Universal Robots. Hey, thanks for taking the time. Really some fun, interesting, fascinating insights.
Thank you, Todd. It was a great conversation. Take care.
That wraps today's episode. On behalf of my guest, Joe Campbell, and our sponsor, the Knots Company, I'm Todd Youngblood. Talk to you again soon.